Hello, and welcome back to Anti-Depressing, the show.
We're back.
We are.
It's our first or second episode, depending.
Who's to say when this comes out?
But
who's
honestly,
to say?
so
We're
fun.
excited to be here.
Yeah.
This is the show where we talk about everything from liturgy to Lexapro, and we look at pop culture through the lens of our faith. And we're excited to share 3 stories with you today. But first, related to our stories later, we are going to talk about if we could have married one of our musician crushes from one of our favorite bands as our youth, who would it be and why? But we're answering for each other.
Okay, so I'll answer for you first. I already know the answer. Jasmine already married Stephen Jobert. She won the fangirl lottery.
My OG band crush.
OG band crush. And he had a crush on her too. How many times does that happen where it's reciprocated? Can you believe it?
Not a lot.
Yeah, so you actually won that. Pero if Stephen did not exist, then I know that you would marry Nick Jonas, which is a great choice. You have a kind heart. I don't know if you were some of us that once Nick Jonas revealed that he had diabetes, you were like, I can heal him. I don't know if you were.
I know that took time for me to get over.
Yeah,
that was hard. That was hard. I was scared, stressed.
Yeah. I remember going on my family computer and like Googling how much insulin costs. And I was like, I'm pretty sure.
Can I heal him?
I can support him. So yours would definitely be Nick Jonas for sure.
100%. 100%. Yours as an adult woman, and this will reveal a little bit of one of your toxic traits, would be John Mayer for sure, I think. Just the edginess, the moodiness.
Yeah. It's the instability for me.
Yeah, it's the angst.
Yeah,
for
he
sure.
he did a podcast where he was interviewed on this podcast called Call Her Daddy, and he was interviewed and he said something about the kind of girl that he would like would be a girl that would just show up at his house, sit on his couch, eat snacks. They don't have to talk. She leaves.
And you were like, it's me.
Yeah. And then a couple seconds later, I was like, I should want more for myself.
You should, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So in my adulthood, Intoxica.
Yes. Yeah. In your youth, pure of heart, I think you would have fought me to the death for Nick Jonas. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We would have been fighting.
Would have.
But you had a little moment where you hopped brothers, which I think we should acknowledge that Camp Rock came out and you hard skipped to Joe Jonas.
I did. No, I did. It was something about the hair, the dancing, the musicality. I don't even know if that means anything for what I'm actually talking about. But
I don't know either.
He was just very spicy.
It was the moment he came in during like the final whatever. I don't know.
Where's This Is Me
he
with
was
Demi
like,
Lovato.
You're the voice I hear inside my head.
Absolutely.
And Chanel was like, I'm
the
voice
reason that he's singing. Yeah, so it was something about that to 13-year-old Chanel that I was like, it's just so spicy to me. So I definitely, I was like, Nick can take care of himself. And then Nick started dating Miley, and I was like, ugh.
That was the whole thing. That was hard for all of us.
I don't know, but maybe Joe will be single forever. Who knows?
Who knows?
But now he has 2 beautiful kids, so God bless.
Cheers to him.
I'm happy for him.
Cheers to both of them.
Am I? I don't know. So
I don't know if you are. You could hop skip.
I am not.
I am happily married. But you could maybe fight for him.
You're like, I married my band crush. I am the winner if this is a competition. Got it. Okay. So great. So wonderful. So enough of me feeling sorry for myself. This will turn into that
You're
podcast.
Doing great, yeah.
Thank you so much. So why don't we just slide right into the stories of the day? So our first story is one that you have for us.
Yes. Our first story is probably the least depressing of our anti-depressing day. And that is that an 8-year-old boy found out that his Waffle House waiter that he generally saw was living in a motel. And so he started a fundraiser and raised over $100,000 for him and his family. Beautiful.
There's something about those stories that I just love. And I'm wondering like what the reason is. I could be pessimistic and say it's because this world is depressing. So when you see positive things, you're like,
you're kind of shook.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, this is it. But then also there's a part of me that's like, we're just all of us are wired to be charitable and to want to help others.
Especially when you're 8 years old.
Yeah, especially when you're little, because it's just like, you're just, all you see is someone that's suffering, even your babies, even when they're at their sassiest, they're like, Noelle will still say to her little sister Joy, she'll be like, do you want this? Do you need help?
Still trying.
Yes, still trying, because in their minds, all they see is just like wanting to help. And that's such a beautiful thing. I'm curious for you, when was the last time that you felt kind of like inspired to help and to help someone? And how do you kind of do that in your day-to-day life? Really putting you on the spot, because if you're not charitable, this answer would absolutely suck.
I've never helped anyone.
If you're not a nice person, then this is going to be
this is going to be hard for me. No, I think honestly the biggest thing for me lately, I mean, obviously I'm home with my kids all day, every day, so my exposure to the outside world is pretty limited. And so I think a big focus and something that's been on my heart is like to show my kids what that looks like. And so especially like just the acknowledgement of other people as human beings, like especially the people who are helping you, the people that are like waiting on you at a restaurant, that kind of stuff has been really important to me. And then also just like teaching them about the realities. Like the other day, Noelle learned for the first time that some people don't have homes, which was so crazy, because she was like, well, why don't we give them houses? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, that would be great, right? If we could just give them all the houses. And so getting to have those conversations, but then it really does push me to think like, okay, well, what could we be doing more of? And obviously I also work for a mission trip organization. And so I think something that I've been focusing on is being intentional about what kind of service sites I want our teens to go to this summer, and what that looks like, and what like good service looks like. Service that will have like a lasting impact, service that is like person to person and meaningful. And so that's been really important to me, to kind of like look for that, because those opportunities to serve have been really important in forming me into somebody who like values that, and who looks for it in the day to day. And so I think, long answer to your question, but my focus has been more on just like the everyday, like, okay, I don't have to like plan for Saturday, I'm going to go do like this service to this community, but like, how can I serve everyone I encounter each day? And what can that look like? And making it more like a practical everyday part of my life. Like, going off of that, something I want to shout out for you is that when I read this article, I immediately thought of you, and I'm doing the Pray 40 challenge on Hallow right now. And there's one of the days where someone was talking about how we take advantage of so many people who do things for us. Like, you go to a coffee shop, you don't even look a person in the eye, and you're just like, ask for your coffee and ignore them. And you don't look at your waiter in the eye. You don't look at a homeless person in the eye. And I think of like my experiences with you, and you are never like that. You always focus on like making people feel human and acknowledging their help. And I mean, we've been running camps together for almost 10 years. And every time we get to a school, you will find like the janitorial staff and the like admins and all of those people first. And you're like, I'm Chanel, what's your name? What's your name? And like, if you see someone taking out the trash, you will like run after them to be like, what's your name? And you remember every time. And when you see them in the hallway, you're like, oh my gosh, hey, Gertrude, how's it going? And you're like, thank you so much for everything you do. And that, like, I see that, the people around you see that, and that has been so inspiring to me, to just like those little ways of taking a pause from what you're doing to acknowledge someone's humanity, make people feel so important. And you do an amazing job at that. So thank you for being you.
Thank you so much for saying that. Those compliments almost make up for the fact that you won the competition of actually marrying your band crush.
Almost.
Yes. No. So yeah, but it's so beautiful, just through in the mind of babes, everything is just so pure and wonderful, and they just want to love even when they're being sassy. They just want to put others above them. And in a lot of ways we can do that, in ways that aren't even burdensome, like you were saying, because sometimes we don't have to wait for some big mission trip or some big opportunity. It can just be acknowledging the exhausted people at your local post office or whatever, and just being like, man, I know you're really tired, but you're doing a great job. Or I know you're kind of have a lot of tables, but you're doing a great job. And just being a human being. Because I think a lot of us, while we feel encouraged about these kind of stories, is because, you know, so many times all that we do see in media is things that are like just so negative, right?
Yeah.
Like people not being other people, not acknowledging human beings, and it can just become so much of a downer. So when we see things like this, I remember a story years ago of this woman at Waffle House as well. Waffle House, wow, it's a God's restaurant.
Breakfast restaurant.
Yeah. So this woman at Waffle House, she was a cashier, and she saw this old man eating and like cut up his food for him and helped feed him while he was there, and just stood there at the counter and fed him while he was sitting for like 20 minutes. And the story got, you know, so viral, and it was just, I mean, it's things like this happen because we're like, it brings us back to the idea that we all do belong to each other, you know, and we're responsible for one another, and you don't have to do something like raise $100,000, but that's also great. So, you know, so that's
and
awesome.
like our biggest call as Christians, as Catholics, is like to see Jesus in one another and like serve in that way. And so this is such a, like you're saying, an extreme example of that. And some people might think like, well, I'm not going to do a fundraiser for $100,000, but like, how can you acknowledge the other in your day today, in your day this week, in this month? Like, in what ways are you going to like acknowledge each other's humanity?
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of, you know, acknowledging humanity, our next story is a disregard for humanity. So
big yikes.
Yeah, big yikes. So our next story is all about Chris Rock's new stand-up special, where he talks all about Will Smith and the infamous Oscar slap. So if you have not been on planet Earth in the past couple of years, you might have missed this huge moment. I think just a year ago, because the Oscars are in a week. Just a year ago, Chris Rock was presenting or hosting, and Will Smith got on stage and said some words that I do not think we're allowed to say on this podcast. And and slapped Chris Rock in the face. And it has been, and I mean, I think Chris Rock could have like easily gotten a concussion. That was a hard hit. So
yes, he claims he did.
He claims he did. And so it has been a year. Chris Rock has not said anything. We have all been waiting on our hands to see what he has said. He has not released like any media statements.
No, but he has been touring with a stand-up special.
Yes.
And has been making jokes about it.
Yep. And so,
which, big disclaimer, if you're going to listen to that special, there are some funny moments, and there are also some pretty intense, like graphic moments.
Yep.
And I would not recommend.
There we go.
So this is our disclaimer that we're not saying you should go listen to this Netflix special, and it's awesome. But the end 7 minutes talk about this.
There it is.
And this is applicable to what we're talking about today.
Yes, y'all. So we don't want any letters saying.
Don't say anything crazy. We were not into the jokes he was making in the middle. So that's it.
There it is. Yes. So, but him being slapped by Will Smith was, I remember exactly where I was.
Yeah.
I remember what I was doing. I was on a book study about boundaries with my sisters. And I stopped the book study, as I do. And was like, do you guys see what's happening on Twitter right now? And it was all about this slap. At first, I thought it was a joke. It was not. And so Chris Rock talked all about it in his new special. And can you tell us a little bit about like what you heard?
What happened?
What happened?
Yeah, it sounded like, I think a lot of people were like, what happened in this moment? And did like Chris Rock say something that went too far? And in the special, he was saying like, well, years ago, Jada Pinkett Smith, right? That's her full name. She was upset about her husband Will not getting nominated for an award, so she went on to like badmouth Chris Rock for continuing to present at these awards, even though her husband didn't get nominated. So she's always kind of had beef with him, and his thing was like, I am gonna get a paycheck, I don't really care what happens to your husband. And then years later, he kind of had his moment to like show her, and so he made a joke about her that probably uncalled for, right? And Will Smith got very upset and came up and slapped Chris Rock. And Chris Rock in the special also made all sorts of references to the fact that, like, Will and Jada's marriage may not be as a beautiful fairy tale as we all thought.
For anyone that keeps up, like on, if you listen to, I listen to all kinds of entertainment news, and Will Smith and Jada and their entanglement is all over everything.
And it's a little messy.
Yeah, so it's definitely a little messy. So one thing that struck me about the special was Chris Rock talking about how he loved Will Smith.
Yes, like idolized.
Idolized Will Smith, and how he was just like, dude, it was so disappointing, like, to be, well, I mean, it's disappointing to be disregarded as a person,
be slapped in the face on national television.
That's ultimate. I mean, wow, disappointing. But it just also to be like slapped in the face by
an idol.
Like, yes. I mean, he was saying that he's watched Will Smith perform, he's watched him, he's followed his career, he's recommended him for things, and it's just like such a bummer. And I was thinking about kind of just in our own day-to-day lives how we have people that we idolize, and especially Absolutely. You know, celebrity culture and you know, people that we look up to, and just how, I don't know, because this could be a bigger conversation on like cancel culture and just celebrity culture and idolization. But I know that you are super grounded at talking about kind of lifting people up and how that can be really disappointing sometimes. Yeah. When they eventually let you down. So
yeah, I think there's like a very toxic trait in our culture to put celebrities on this like idolic like platform where we are like, they can do no wrong. And I mean, we have our people like that, and I will stand for my people. Yep. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, if Taylor Swift turned around and did something crazy, would I be like, she did not do that? I would not. I would be like, you know what? I do not know that woman. I do not know that woman. I do not know what she does in her free time. I just like her songs, right? But I think people get into this very like addicted to a celebrity where they'll like fight for them. And we saw that a lot in like the Johnny Depp trial, that people were like, he would never. And then his therapist was on the stand and we're like, he would. He would. It was like crazy, right?
He has tendencies for violence.
Yeah, he's like a little violent. And then people were still like, they're all wrong, right? But we like are obsessed with our people and claim that they can do no wrong. And I do think like, even though obviously Chris Rock also developed a relationship with Will Smith that wasn't that, like, he had this idolism of who he was and was like, oh, he is like the greatest, like he's paving the way for all of us. And in a lot of ways he was. And I think still, even when like Will Smith slaps Chris Rock on television, people were like, it must have been a joke. Will Smith would never.
I remember that.
Or people were like, he was defending his wife. Like, it's beautiful that he did that. Like, you need to defend your wife if someone says something crazy on television. And she was like, so I don't, like, she didn't really seem like she wanted her husband to go up and slap somebody in the face, right? And so I do think, like, when we put someone on such a platform, we have a tendency for disappointment, and people will let us down, especially people we don't know, to like think they're the world like that. It's just going to lead to disappointment.
Yeah, you know? And that's a wonderful point and example. And I think like a lot of us, what I think of, especially, you know, in Christian culture, we have this kind of ideal of when people like regular people will say, oh, you know, I have accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, or I whatever, and then immediately we're like, boom, yes, like, you know, television appearances, yes, like parades, like so special prayers, like we're naming novenas after you, like, yes, like we're doing it, and it just becomes so intense. And I'm curious, and, you know, obviously, like, we don't know all the answers, but I'm just always curious about like how that balance can be achieved. Because it's good to look up to people, because then, I mean, what would we be if we didn't have idols? I mean, my biggest is my mother, and so
that's true, but she's a saint.
But she is. She is. She's probably listening. She's like, "Don't you dare say something bad about me." But it's like she is. But it's like, but sometimes, am I also like, Stace, if you come in my room one more time without knocking,
I'm gonna be over it.
Yeah, like I'm absolutely sleeping at 1 o'clock. So it's hard to have that balance of, you know, respect, but also knowing that people can be people. And not to say if Chris Rock would have been like, oh, Will Smith's just a regular person like I am, that it would have made the infringement on his personal boundaries any easier. But I'm thinking through, like, how much more is it horrible when we think that someone can do nothing wrong,
and then they do something
and
wrong.
then they do something wrong.
And to us, like, how extreme is that? And I'm wondering what you think, like, are the theological implications on somebody who's, like, looked up to somebody for so long, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, this person that I thought was everything now disappointed me or hurt me. And, like, what do you think kind of relationship that can have, or effect that can have on somebody's faith?
I mean, probably a really intense one. I can imagine, one, for the responsibility of the person. It's all of us. I think about, Jesus saying, if you're a teacher, if you hold some sort of position of leadership, you'll be judged more harshly. Like, you have a greater responsibility to not be horrible.
Yeah.
And so the implication on that person's soul is intense.
Yeah.
But then also, just as a person that's a receiver of whatever that person is offering, I imagine that's just such a bummer. And I know for me, when I was in college, I had moments with different groups and different people. And I just remember being so... You get shell-shocked, because you hold people up to this standard, and when they don't meet that, it's hard, especially when you give people no latitude, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it's super tough. So I can imagine that it can be a moment of complete fracturing of faith. I've met many people, and I have many good friends that are like, have their faith be something where they're having a difficult time, or they have had a difficult time because they're like, man, I've just been so let down, and that's fair. Totally. And so it's interesting to think about how we can balance that, because should we be saying to people, oh, just set your expectations lower, or because that also is the worst, or should we be saying to people like, okay, it's fair that you're disappointed, but God has conquered the earth, so, like, ultimately it's no big deal. Like, how do you
Yeah, and I think, too, going off what you're saying, a lot of people, like, make these celebrities their God, and then when they are disappointed, they're like, well, why would I believe in anything if I can't believe in this? And I think, like, as a culture, people feel very hopeless, and I imagine, like, if you don't believe in God, like, what is the hope? Like, you loved this celebrity, and then they disappointed you, and then you, like, ride or died for this president, and then he disappointed you, and then people just keep being disappointed because people are always going to disappoint you, and that is my depressing point of the day. Because they are, right? Like, I'm married, my husband is incredible, impresses me every day, but there are times where you could be a little disappointed, right? And vice versa, because I am not an angel every day, right? But it's like, am I losing my faith in who he is as a person? Is my world, like, ruined because he didn't unload the dishwasher? Like, no. And I think the idea of, like, being disappointed in someone is fine if they are not, like, made to be your God. Like, if you are not worshiping
that's
them,
a good distinction. Yeah, that's a good distinction. Like, it's okay, but we just have to put people in their appropriate place.
Yes.
And then it will make that less severe.
Yeah.
So.
And, like, there's still hope because there's somebody who isn't disappointing us.
Wow. Yes. Definitely a depressing point of the day. Thank you, Jasmine, for bringing us down.
You're so welcome. I ended with hope.
No, you ended with hope. No, there is hope.
Gospel.
Jasmine was like, honestly, I'm about to bring this whole thing down, but don't forget that
I'm building it back up.
I married my band crush, and you all did not. So, yeah. So
good transition.
No, good transition. So, speaking of band crush, our last story of the day is just really rounding it out. The Jonas Brothers came out with new music.
Everything begins and ends with Jonas.
Wow, he is the beginning. No, too soon.
Too far.
Too much. So the Jonas Brothers are coming out with a new album. I believe that it's coming out in May.
Something like that.
I think so, May 2023. And they came out with a single, and it's called Wings, and it's funky. It's cool. It's funky. It's like, it's so fun. It's definitely it's
good vibes.
Yeah, it's good vibes. It's like just fun, like dancing
Very
around,
80s,
very
very
80s,
80s,
super chill. Yeah, super fun. And I feel like everyone's kind of segueing into that kind of music. Like John Mayer's last album, Sob Rock, was kind of that vibe.
You would bring up John Mayer.
I would bring up John Mayer. And for reasons we can talk about on another podcast, he is very controversial.
Yes. He's done some things.
Pero his music is so good. So, but yeah, so like, they came out with their new song Wings, and which I don't know how much we're allowed to play of songs on a podcast, because I don't know if we had to pay like streaming rights. So
I don't know the rules. We won't play it.
We won't play it.
But you should listen to it.
It's like, you are the one. So that's essentially it. So yeah, you've listened to it. And so they came out with this new song, so great, and they're coming out with new music. I saw them, a year and a half ago in concert. So good.
Beautiful.
Yes, and when they go on tour again, we're gonna go.
We will be there.
Yes, and they were actually my first concert when I was in 9th grade, so full circle, and they are just they were one of the most influential bands when I was younger. Like, I just listened to them all the time. I would come home, watch interviews of them, cut out Nick's face on magazines.
Always.
It was just, I was like obsessed with them.
Yes. Tell me something. To what degree did they influence your life?
Oh my gosh, like so much. I mean, I definitely thought I had diabetes for like 10 years. So
you still might.
I know diabetes does run in my family every other day. I'm like,
it was a sad joke to me.
Like years ago, Jasmine's been my friend for like 10 years, and almost every year I'll be like, oh man, I just like don't want to have diabetes, and you're like, just get your blood tested. So definitely very influential in making me more health conscious, which was great. But also just in, helping me feel like, wow, being a Christian is so cool. Like so cool. In Jonas Brothers' smash hit Love Bug, when they say, when Nick says, I can't get your smile out of my mind, can't get you out of my mind. Modesty is just so hard to find. I remember being like, what? Like,
I am here. Huh? I'm hard to find, but I'm here.
Modesty? Yeah, shook.
Modest is hottest, baby.
Yeah, so they made me want to be a Christian so bad, and be it seriously, so much so that I brought my booty to Cato's and Claire's, and I found myself a purity ring. I begged my mom for a purity ring. Yes. And it was just everything to me. I wore that with confidence. For everyone listening, yes, wore. No, just kidding. But yes, I did wear it. I don't wear it anymore.
Has it.
I still have it.
Make a clarification.
Yeah, I should make a clarification. That's why I was like, But I wore that with confidence, and I loved it, and they influenced me tremendously. And I know that you were also part of Purity Ring Gang.
I was, because of the Jonas Brothers.
Because of the Jonas Brothers,
yes. I was in 8th grade, and I read an article, and probably like, what was that, like teen whatever?
Yeah, Teen Beat, Teen Heart.
There was. And it was all about how they had purity rings, and they were like unapologetically gonna wait for marriage. And I was like, I will also wait for Nick Jonas.
Yep. And that's the distinction. Was I going to wait for marriage, or was I gonna wait for Nick Jonas?
It was gray at first, I would say, but I was inspired. That like really shook me to see someone in celebrity culture that was, one, talking about their faith, two, talking about purity, which is something I was like pretty already on board with. And so I was like, this is it. And I went to my mom and I was like, I need a purity ring. And she was like, what is that? And what are you talking about? And I explained it to her, and I tried really hard to not say that it had anything to do with the Jonas Brothers, because my mom would have been like, what?
Knowing your mom, she would have been like, I'm not.
No. But surprisingly, still, even after I did not bring up the Jonas Brothers, my mom said, now some context, I was homeschooled until 8th grade. In 8th grade, I went to a school where there were 3 people in my 8th grade class. Me, another girl who was my best friend, and a boy that neither of us had crushes on, okay? And my mom was like, here's the thing. You kind of only know your brothers and like a handful of boys that aren't like the cutest. So she's like, what we're going to do is you can go through a year of high school maybe have some crushes, see if some boys like you. And at the end of your freshman year of high school, when it's your birthday in April, if you still want a purity ring, then great. She's like, but why don't you just like get to know some boys that aren't your brothers and like we'll check back in.
Got it.
I was offended, like cut deep, man. So I was like, you think I'm just going to go to high school and be crazy? Which your story was actually pretty similar. Your mom was not like, let's head down to Claire's right away.
She was not, which honestly, Stacy, it hurt me. I will never forget it.
It did.
I've been working through it. No, just kidding, but I have. But yes, we were in the car. We were driving, and I was like, Mommy, I think I want to get a purity ring. And she was like, okay. Who are you planning on having sex with? And I said, cutthroat, Stacy. Yes. So absolutely no one at that time. Not because I was not cute. I was definitely
cute.
I was
the whole
cute. I
time,
was
the
rocking
whole
my
time.
little like mohawk. I had my pink hair. I had
were looking good.
had my Christian punny shirts.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely something. But I just remember her being like, Chanel, I just don't know. I think it's okay. Like I don't think
I don't think you're pressed to show people that you're pure.
And I had to work through that for a long time. So the Jonas Brothers definitely influenced me pretty severely in that way.
Yeah.
And for
we both
years,
ended up with purity rings.
We did. We
Yeah.
both ended up with purity rings, and I got mine blessed. It was like a whole thing. Blah,
whole
blah.
thing.
Yeah, and so it's just crazy how influential that culture can be, especially when it comes again like from celebrities and that kind of dynamic.
It's wild that both of us were influenced by like the one celebrities who were into purity culture.
Yep.
And you think about like, I mean, I had my purity ring till I got married, so we like rocked that. And I remember like giving a talk at camp my first summer working there and talking about it. And then like some other girls got purity rings. And I want to preface that, how some purity culture is a little like, and now I'm going to present you these rings and you all need to get one right now. Not in that kind of vibe. But I do think like that was a positive impact they had. And then we were a little crushed, but not crushed enough to take off our rings.
When they said, hey, we, LOL, you guys.
Not
it was
worth
a joke. It was a joke. We were not actually virgins.
We were not. And it was not worth waiting for.
It was not worth
I
it,
think
you guys.
Kevin Jonas's exact quote when he got married, he was like, I waited and that was not worth it.
I could have
and that crushed us.
Could have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah,
and honestly, vibe kill. Yes. So it's like, it's so crazy how, so influenced by them, look so much up to them, and still think that, they're like, they seem like cool dudes. They have families now, kids, etc. But it's interesting in that like formative time of your life. I was so pressed. Like I would have been
wanted to be just like
them. And I'm curious, do you have another, band or group when you were younger? I'm specifically thinking of like all the Christian bands that came out during like the God era of Christian music. Outside of your husband's era.
Of course.
Were you heavily influenced by any other, artists back in the day?
That's a good question. I pretty much rode in the, like, once I was into it in, like, late high school, I hung out a lot with, like, my core members at, like, events and stuff, and they always were just, like, crushing the K-Love, like all that stuff. So I would like bop with some of like just the in the pocket Christian stuff that everybody knows. So we don't even need to go there. Everybody knows it. And I was into that. But really, as funny as it is, my husband's old music back in the aileron era, when everything was fresh, is really the first stuff that I was like, whoa, this is Christian music that isn't like K-Love vibes. And much love to everybody who has music featured on K-Love.
Much love to my K-Love crew. Yep.
But you know what I'm saying. But it was like still like rock and punk and like all the things that I loved about like some of those bands, because I was a big like punk rock but cutesy girl, in high school.
Yeah.
And so being able to like listen to that aileron music, that was the first band that I was like, here we go. In my first summer at camp in 2011, little small jazz band, I was like, this is crazy. They're so good. And got posters signed of them, had a signed poster of my future husband on my wall. Loved it. And that was also just the first time I'd ever heard praise and worship played during adoration. And it was just such like a moving, game-changing experience for me. Actually, my first time in adoration as well. So everything at one time. But yeah, that kind of launched me into the like Reliant K Switchfoot vibe. And then I found like My Little Pocket. One time I saw Red Jumpsuit Apparatus at like a Christian festival, and I was like, I am relevant. I felt amazing. But yeah, I don't know. My husband's aileron stuff really got me.
Yeah, aileron has some hits. They have, what did the kids say? They have bangers, right?
They have bangers.
Yeah.
Bops is out, right?
Bops is out.
Bangers
I think
okay.
Bops are, a little too old
Thank
school.
you.
But yeah, that's interesting that you say that. So your husband's music, definitely rock. But I was more edgy than you in this instance.
Oh, I know.
I
Always,
was very,
instance.
very much. So I was very into Flyleaf. Did you ever listen to that?
I did.
Okay, yes. So Flyleaf was it. And until I figured out, so I went through, which, could be for another episode where, went through my whole not God era, not believing in him when I was in high school and middle school. And I just remember listening to Flyleaf and being like, man, like this is the edgiest. Like they get it. Like they feel rage. Like they're upset. And my youth minister at the time saying like, wow, can you believe like Christian bands are making such good music? And I was like, what?
I'm shocked.
So disappointed. So then, we segue into just being disappointed because I held them up to such, I was like, no, they can't be cool and Christian. Like what? But for everyone out there, if, the God era of Christian music, Flyleaf, which is kind of a little jarring at first, if it's can kind of be a little intense, but then I was definitely heavy on the Mercy Me.
Yes.
Heavy on the Switchfoot.
We also notably both went through a little bit of a Skillet phase.
Oh, heavy on the Skillet.
Heavy.
How
That
did I
drummer
even
shook
forget?
me.
I saw
Shook me.
Skillet live. And I saw.
We also both saw the Newsboys live.
Yes.
In that spinning drummer.
Yeah, I
We
saw
were
the
like,
Newsboys.
This is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yes, I think I saw them right before
Shook.
that God movie came out that they had music in.
Yeah, they went so hard for that movie.
Yeah, whatever that God movie was. But I can't remember.
Not dead,
God's not dead. I was like, God's not real. But
I've never seen it.
like, oh my gosh, so heavy on the Skillet. Especially
So
love that
heavy.
song. I feel it in my skin. I feel like a monster. Oh man,
bop.
I love them. So
Yeah.
it's just so funny how those things stick with us. And honestly, probably after we're done recording, I will listen to just
Probably
like
put on a little
2000s
bit.
Christian music as we're cleaning up our recording space. But yeah, like it's so interesting how, certain bands just continue to exist.
Yeah.
We have Switchfoot still existing. And then we have new bands that are coming on the scene. We have Lauren Daigle. We have Sarah
good.
Kroger. We have, who else do we have? We have your husband.
Yeah, I mean, we
have
listen to
Nova.
Novum stuff.
Yeah,
All
we
the
have
Novum artists, we bop with that.
Yeah, Flynn. It's like we have.
Yeah,
There's
Flynn's great.
so many bands that are just like doing such a good job
Yes.
at just like helping us worship the Lord.
Yes,
But, like-
and not always in like a slow praise and worship. I am constantly saying like God is awesome,
Yeah.
but like in different ways, or just music that's wholesome that doesn't say anything crazy.
Yes,
you know?
like even like Ben Rector's music, like wholesome, but not saying anything like nuts.
Yes.
And just like so good. But also that
Yeah,
guy's
it's
like
a
playing
gift.
at the
It's a
Kennedy
gift.
Center.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
like such a gift. So
Let me ask you this:
all good things.
on the heavy praise and worship side.
Okay.
What is the song that you're in adoration and it starts getting played? Like you hear the little guitar intro come in, you hear the little piano intro, and you're like, "Ugh, I'm gonna cry."
Got it. Okay.
What is your song?
Got it.
Are you gonna play it?
I don't know if we, you guys, you'll know if we can't afford to pay for this.
If there's silence in the next couple
if there's
seconds,
silence in the next couple seconds,
only play a few seconds.
Our
Isn't
producer
it like
has
20
cut it
seconds
out.
and under? I don't know.
So okay, guess the song. Wait. Okay, you know
If
it.
it's the same song, I'll scream.
Would it be? That would be pretty.
I don't
crazy.
know.
Okay, here we go. All right. Wow. Okay, here we go. Chanel, I'm being so slow. this one, dude.
That too.
This. Heart Runs by John Mark McMillan.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, that is like one where I'll be like, my heart runs. And I'm like, and especially when your husband sings it.
I know.
Dude, he sings that song so well.
That gets us.
Yeah, and it's so good. And granted, I've only heard her husband sing it, but.
That's fair. There was that song where we sang it together.
That is true.
That's one referencing.
Jasmine has it. Maybe on one episode, we'll just have you sing. But it was,
No.
but it was so good. So that's one of my favorites. How about you?
Okay, mine is like a OG, and Lord, I Need You, of course. It just, honestly, I could hear it a quadrillion times, and I have.
Got it.
But it is the first one that, like, I was in adoration, first time ever in my life. My husband started singing it, not my husband at the time. And I was like, what is this? Like, first time hearing the song, first time in adoration, and just wept. And still, every time it'll start being played, and I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I'll be like, why did you play that to my husband? Because he knows I'm going to weep.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my go-to cry during adoration song.
That's a good one. Wow. Well, I feel like, I mean, we have really covered the gamut from, from charity to boundaries to why the Jonas Brothers were singularly the main influence for my entire personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Thank you so much, Kevin, Joan,
and Nick. So I really feel like we have covered it.
We have covered it.
Yeah.
And honestly, just a moment of thanks and gratitude to all the musicians out there who have heavily influenced our faith, because I know that it's hard out there making music, doing the thing. But for people like us, like, my faith has been greatly influenced by the art that people have created. It's been such a gift.
And when you think that the kids don't listen or it's not impacting, it is. Even your husband, whenever, a group of us will be in a car and we'll be like, you know what we want to listen to? Old Aileron. And we'll play it and we're like, dude, this was, and your husband
like screaming.
Yeah, and your husband will be like, okay,
it got us through.
Yeah, we're just like, dude, I used to listen to this song like all the time. So good. Well,
it's a gift.
Jasmine, it has been real. This has been great. As usual, what is it? Comment, rate,
like, subscribe.
Comment, like, subscribe. Smash that like button. Tell your friends about us.
Tell your friends.
Listen to us next week. We're coming at you with great pop culture moments. We're so happy to be here.
And please pray for us.
Yes.
And we will be praying for you.
Please pray for us. We'll talk to you guys soon.